My daughter introduced me as her mom's ex at her graduation. We were still living in the same house, even with her mom. The applause hadn't even died down before I realized how invisible I truly was. That night, everything changed. I left, but what happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you how it all unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Rita Spence from Alabama. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. They say silence can be peaceful, even beautiful. Whoever said that never lived in a house like mine, where silence wasn't peace, it was punishment. Where it sat heavy in the air like the smell of something rotting, something you couldn't quite place but knew had been there too long. For years, Monica and I existed in a space that used to feel like home. We moved like polite strangers, each step carefully measured, every interaction boiled down to logistics. Did you pay the water bill? Jessa needs 20 for lunch. The garbage goes out tomorrow. Our words became transactions. And me? I became a ghost in my own house, slowly fading into the walls I had painted myself, with my own hands, back when the colors still meant something. I never imagined we'd end up like that. I used to believe we had a fighting chance, Monica and I. In the beginning, we shared everything, laughter, secrets, dreams about beach houses and European vacations we never took. But time has a cruel way of sanding down even the strongest bonds. First, the laughter thinned. Then came the missed date nights, the unanswered texts, the cold shoulders in bed. Eventually, the love gave out entirely, but we stayed. Not for each other, God no. We stayed for Jessa. Or at least, that's what I told myself. That somehow our presence under one roof was a gift to her. A sense of stability in a world spinning out faster every year. What a goddamn lie that turned out to be. Jessa wasn't my biological daughter, but she may as well have been. I met her when she was 5, already sharp and wary, like she'd learned too early not to trust too easily. I spent years earning that trust, braiding her hair before school, helping her build science fair volcanoes, clapping at every ballet recital even though she had 2 left feet. I never asked for anything in return except recognition, maybe a little appreciation. But when love becomes expected, it starts to vanish. I didn't notice it at first. The way her thank you grew quieter, how she stopped turning to me with her problems. Teenage years, I figured. A phase. But deep down, I felt it. That slow erosion of connection. That creeping irrelevance. I still paid the bills. Fixed the leaks. Drove her to orchestra practice. I showed up, always. Even when Monica and I stopped pretending. Even when I started sleeping in the downstairs den just to avoid the tension. Even when Jessa barely looked up from her phone to say goodnight. I showed up. That was my badge of honor. And honestly, it was the only one I had left. The house itself was a testament to years of effort, mine, mostly. A modest 2-story colonial with creaky floors and a porch swing I installed one summer when Jessa begged for a place to read outside. I remembered how proud she looked sitting there with her paperbacks, legs swinging, sunlight in her hair. Those memories haunted me. They made it harder to leave, even as everything else screamed at me to run. Every nail in that house had a story. Every chip in the paint whispered a history. But the love? That was gone. It had packed its bags long before I ever considered doing the same. Still, I stayed. For the same reason people keep old sweaters. They don't fit. They're worn out. But they remind you of better times. I clung to a version of fatherhood and partnership that no longer existed. Monica was already gone in all the ways that mattered. She had her own life. Her own friends, her own routines, her own bedroom. We could go days without speaking, and when we did, it was always functional, never emotional. I used to wonder if she resented me, if she looked at me and saw a failure. But I think the truth is worse, she didn't see me at all. The morning of Jess's graduation, I stood in the kitchen making scrambled eggs for one. Monica was upstairs still, probably curling her hair, while Jessa was already pacing around the living room in her gown, rehearsing her speech. I watched her from the doorway, my girl, all grown up. She looked radiant, confident, untouchable. I felt this swell of pride rise up in my chest. I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how much she meant to me, how I'd spent every day of her life trying to be the father she deserved. But the words died on my tongue. Instead, I just said, "You look beautiful, kiddo." She smiled, distracted. "Thanks," she said, barely glancing my way. Then she was out the door. At the ceremony, I took my seat in the crowd while Monica sat next to me, her perfume like a stranger's. The auditorium buzzed with chatter and camera shutters. When Jess's name was called, I stood and clapped until my palms stung. She walked across that stage like she owned it. When the principal invited her to say a few words, she leaned into the mic and started thanking people, her mom, her teachers, her friends. Then she said, "And to my mom's ex, thanks for being around, I guess." Just like that. My mom's ex. Not my father. Not even my stepdad. My mom's ex. The applause hadn't even died down before the weight of it crushed me. I sat there smiling like a fool, hands frozen mid-clap. The crowd roared around me, oblivious. Monica didn't look at me. Jessa didn't either. It was like I'd been edited out of my own life. And in that moment, something inside me broke, not with anger, but with finality. I realized I'd been fighting for a place in a family that had already moved on. They just hadn't told me yet. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell or argue. I walked through that house one last time, every step echoing with ghosts of who I used to be. I packed a single suitcase, clothes, a few framed photos, my grandfather's watch, and left everything else. I didn't say goodbye. There was no point. They wouldn't have noticed until morning. But I made one quiet vow as I locked the door behind me. They wouldn't hear from me again. Not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop begging for scraps. And from that night forward, they didn't just lose my presence. They lost access to everything I gave without question. My time, my effort, and my money. The morning of Jess's graduation felt like the eye of a hurricane. Calm, almost deceptively so, but with tension simmering beneath every surface. I woke up before anyone else, as usual. The house was still, sun sliding through the blinds in stripes, catching on the dust particles I never seemed to have time to clean. I stood at the stove making coffee, watching it percolate with the same focus I'd used for years to survive each day. One step at a time. One small task after another. That was the trick to living in a house where you no longer belonged. Keep moving so the stillness doesn't swallow you. Jess's cap and gown had been hanging in the hallway for days. Navy blue with gold trim. I couldn't help but pause every time I walked past it. That fabric represented something final, an ending, not just for her but for all of us. She was moving on. That was the natural course of things. What wasn't natural was the way I felt pushed out before I even had a chance to say goodbye. I thought we were still a family, fractured though we were. I thought that counted for something. But by then, I should have known better. I wasn't in the picture anymore, not really. I was in the background, blurred out, cropped at the edges. Still, I dressed up for the occasion. Pressed shirt, polished shoes, even a tie Monica had given me for my birthday 2 years prior, back when we still pretended we cared. She didn't notice. When she came downstairs, she was in heels and makeup, looking every bit the proud mother. "You ready?" she asked without looking me in the eye. I nodded. "Yeah, you." She gave a shrug and turned away, already texting someone. We hadn't driven together in months, but that morning, we did. 3 people sharing a car, each lost in their own silence. The school auditorium was packed, buzzing with energy. Students clutched roses, gowns swishing as they hugged and posed for selfies. Parents jostled for good seats. I held Monica's coat as she dabbed at her lipstick in a compact mirror. Jessa had vanished backstage hours earlier. I wanted to see her, to hug her before the ceremony, but Monica waved me off when I suggested it. She's probably too nervous. Let her be. So I sat, quiet, obedient, smiling politely at strangers while my gut twisted like a knife in a drawer. When the music started and the procession began, I craned my neck to catch a glimpse of her. There she was, walking in heels she hated, grinning at someone beside her. My heart swelled with pride. That was my girl. My Jessa. The little one who used to hold my hand at the grocery store, who once said she wanted to be a dolphin doctor, who cried when her goldfish died and let me bury it in the garden. I wanted to shout her name, to stand up and wave. But I stayed in my seat, hands folded, eyes burning. The ceremony dragged in that way all school events do. Principals giving speeches, students stumbling over their words at the podium. I clapped for every name. When Jess's was called, I stood, clapping hard, loud. She walked across the stage with such poise, such ease. My heart pounded with pride. I reached for my phone to capture it, but my hands were trembling, and the picture came out blurry. Then she took the mic. I hadn't even known she was giving a speech. No one told me. Not her, not Monica. I leaned forward, smiling. This was it. Her big moment. Our moment. Maybe she'd say something about perseverance, about family, about what it meant to have people behind you who believed in you. My ears strained for every word. She thanked her mother first. Of course. Monica beamed beside me. Then she thanked her friends, her teachers, a guidance counselor whose name I didn't recognize. And to my mom's ex, she said with a quick smile and a laugh, "Thanks for being around, I guess." That was it. No name, no relationship, no father, not even stepdad, just her mom's ex. And not even a warm one. A shrug in verbal form, a dismissal wrapped in politeness. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. Around me, people clapped, cheered. Monica looked straight ahead, face frozen. I kept my smile on like a mask made of wax, waiting for it to melt under the heat of humiliation. I didn't hear another word after that. My ears rang like I'd been slapped. I watched her walk back to her seat, laughing, waving. She never looked my way. Not once. I was a footnote in her story, a blurred figure in the background of her life. I felt it in my bones. The years I gave, the money I spent, the nights I stayed up worrying, the mornings I drove her across town, the weekends I gave up to support her passions, all of it reduced to a line in a speech. A joke. By the time the ceremony ended, I was numb. I followed Monica through the crowd like a ghost. People swarmed Jessa with hugs and flowers, cameras flashing. I stood back, smiling like I belonged there, like I hadn't just been erased. No one noticed me. No one asked me to join the photos. No one even offered to take one with me in it. I could have vanished on the spot, and not a single person would have blinked. And in that moment, I knew I was done. Not with love, not with life, but with pretending. Pretending that I mattered in that house. Pretending that showing up was the same as being seen. That evening, while Monica and Jessa went out to dinner with family friends, I went home. Alone. I didn't wait up. I didn't leave a note. I packed a single duffel. Some clothes, my laptop, the framed photo of Jessa and me from her 8th grade graduation. She had her arms around my neck in that picture, smiling like I was her whole world. I took it with me because I needed to remember that version of us. The one where I wasn't invisible. I walked out into the night, locking the door behind me for the last time. No anger, just clarity. The applause had faded, and so had I. And this time, I didn't plan on coming back. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't write some grand letter explaining everything they had done wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. That night, when I left, it was quiet, like most of my life in that house had been. Just the slow creak of the stairs as I walked up one last time to the room that used to be mine. A room I had been sleeping in alone for the past year, where the bed stayed perfectly made because I barely touched it anymore. It wasn't some dramatic exit. It was surgical, clean. I had been cutting myself out of their lives for months without realizing it. That night was just the final stitch. Packing didn't take long. It never does when the things you care about no longer live where you do. A few pairs of clothes. My shaving kit. The old leather-bound journal I used to write in before everything got too noisy in my head. The only thing I hesitated over was the photo. Jessa at 8, sitting on my shoulders, both of us grinning in some sun-drenched moment I didn't remember anymore. That version of her, of us, felt like a dream I'd once had and woken up from too early. I wrapped the frame in a hoodie and placed it gently in my duffel. I stood at her bedroom door for a while. It was cracked open, the way she always left it. Her light was still on, clothes scattered across the floor, open laptop humming quietly on the desk. She wasn't home yet. Still out with Monica and their friends, probably at some overpriced restaurant, celebrating like everything was whole. I didn't step inside. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there, staring, heart thudding like I was about to rob a place instead of leave one. Part of me hoped, foolishly, that she'd come home early, that we'd run into each other, that she'd say something, anything, to make me stay. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. She hadn't truly seen me in months, maybe years. The house made small sounds behind me, pipes settling, the distant hum of the fridge, the wind nudging the front door. I walked through the hallway like a stranger, looking at the framed photos Monica insisted on keeping up even when we stopped pretending. One of our wedding day, one of Jess's first day of middle school. I was in all of them, smiling, eyes hopeful. I wanted to reach in and warn that man, tell him to brace for the years ahead, to save something for himself. But hindsight is cruel like that. It offers all the wisdom too late for you to use it. In the kitchen, I left my keys on the counter. No note, no explanation. Just the keys and my silence, which they'd grown comfortable with anyway. I stood there for a long moment, trying to feel something sharp enough to cut through the numbness, anger, sadness, regret. But what I felt was relief. The kind that's so soft, so deep, it almost feels like sleep. I hadn't realized how heavy it all was until I let it go. I drove to a hotel on the other side of town, one of those small roadside places with scratchy sheets and a microwave bolted to the desk. The man behind the counter didn't even look up when I checked in. He handed me a key card and mumbled something about breakfast hours. I could have been anyone. That anonymity felt like a gift. In the room, I dropped my bag, took off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the muted television. Some game show flickered on the screen. People clapped and laughed. It sounded like a different universe. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious or uncertain. Quite the opposite. My mind was clearer than it had been in years. I laid there in that unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment that led me to this decision now. Not to leave, but to stop waiting for a role I was never going to get. I wasn't Jess's father anymore. Not in the way that mattered to her. And Monica? She stopped being my partner the moment she started introducing herself at parties as single. I was the only one clinging to a title that had expired. The next morning, I turned off my phone. I wasn't ready to hear the fallout. The texts, the missed calls, the confusion. I knew how it would go. First concern, then guilt, and finally, frustration. Because it wasn't that they didn't care, exactly. It was that they cared when it was inconvenient for me to walk away. That's how it always works. People notice your presence only after it becomes an absence. And sure enough, the messages started coming. "Where are you?" from Monica. "Can we talk?" from Jessa. Then came the calls. I watched the screen light up again and again. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I needed, for the first time in my life, to choose myself. To let them sit with the silence I'd been drowning in for years. By the third day, Monica sent a long text. Said she was shocked by my decision. Said I was making things harder than they needed to be. Said Jessa was devastated, though I doubted that. She'd been devastated about a lost phone charger before. I didn't respond. I just deleted the messages and closed the blinds. What they hadn't realized yet, but would soon, is that they didn't just lose the man who took out the trash or paid the tuition or stayed up fixing the internet at midnight. They lost the one person who never asked for much except to be seen. And now they'd have to figure out how to live without that. And for once, I wasn't going to help them. I didn't expect the silence to feel so peaceful. It wasn't the suffocating kind that had haunted me for years in that house. This silence was clean, calm, like fresh air after a storm. I spent the first few days in that hotel moving slow, learning how to take up space again. No one asking where I was going. No sounds of slammed cabinets. No passive-aggressive tension hanging between walls. I could breathe. And it was in that stillness that I started realizing how much of my life had been swallowed by the role I was expected to play. Provider, fixer, doormat. Invisible, as long as I kept giving. I moved into a small apartment a week later. Nothing fancy. One bedroom, creaky floors, kitchen the size of a closet. But it was mine. I furnished it with secondhand stuff, an old couch that slouched in the middle, a coffee table with one leg shorter than the rest. I could have dipped into my savings and bought new, but there was something grounding about starting fresh with things no one else had touched. It reminded me that I didn't have to keep up the performance anymore. I didn't need to present myself as the man who had it all together just to be allowed a place at someone else's table. I had my own now, even if it wobbled. The first real test came when Monica realized the money was gone. I had always kept our accounts linked, never questioned it. Bills auto-paid from a joint pool. Jess's college fund, her car insurance, groceries, everything flowed through me. I didn't mind then. I thought it made me dependable, necessary. But once I left, I quietly rerouted everything, closed the joint accounts, transferred my shares, set new passwords. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I wasn't going to bankroll the life I wasn't part of anymore. Monica called me 5 times that day. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail, her voice clipped and tight. David, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you've left us in a really difficult position. Can we at least be adults about this? I laughed when I heard that, short and bitter. Being adults, to her, meant me funding her convenience while she pretended I didn't exist. I didn't respond. I went for a walk instead. I passed a little bookstore on the corner and picked up a used novel I hadn't read in years. It felt like reclaiming something small and sacred. The next message was from Jessa. Hey, her voice was quiet, rehearsed. Mom says you moved out. I just wanted to know if you're okay. I guess. I don't really get what's happening. That one hurt more. Because she sounded confused, not angry. Like maybe, just maybe, she hadn't fully grasped the weight of her words that day. But then I remembered the way she laughed into the microphone when she called me my mom's ex. How easy it had been to reduce me to a title, a placeholder. And I knew I couldn't walk that road again, not even for her. I started going to therapy. Found a small office across from a laundromat, with peeling wallpaper and a woman named Carla who didn't let me skate past the hard stuff. First session, she asked me, what do you feel when you think about your family? I told her I didn't know. I told her I'd spent so long reacting that I forgot what it meant to just feel. She nodded, like she'd heard that before. Then she asked, what do you want them to know? That question stuck with me long after the session ended. What did I want them to know? That I had been there, really there, every single day. That I gave until I had nothing left, and then gave more. That I stayed quiet not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew no one was listening. That I never needed to be praised, but I did need to be seen. And I wasn't. I wrote all of that down one night in my journal, the same one I hadn't touched since Jessa was in middle school. Page after page, I poured it out, everything I never said. The nights I cried in the car before walking into the house. The arguments I swallowed. The pride I forced down just to keep the peace. I wasn't trying to blame anyone anymore. I just needed to tell the truth. For me, a few weeks passed, and things started to shift. Monica sent a carefully worded email asking if I'd still be contributing to Jess's college tuition. She's applying to her dream school, she wrote, and I don't want her future to be a casualty of whatever you're going through. I didn't respond immediately. I thought about it for days. On the one hand, I didn't want Jessa to suffer. On the other, I couldn't ignore the fact that I was still being asked to pay for a seat at a table I'd been pushed away from. In the end, I replied simply, Jessa has access to the funds in the account I set up in her name. Beyond that, I will not be contributing. My absence is not a punishment. It is a boundary. I didn't hear back after that, but I started hearing more from myself. For the first time in a long time, I knew what I valued. I knew what I was worth. Not in dollars, but in dignity. And if that meant losing the only family I'd ever had, so be it. Because being needed is not the same as being loved. And being used is not the same as being chosen. It was a Thursday, gray sky, damp pavement, the kind of day where everything feels heavier than it should. I had just gotten back from a grocery run, carrying a paper bag of frozen meals and discount soap, when I heard the knock. Not a casual tap, either. It was deliberate, a little too loud, too quick. I froze in the entryway. I hadn't invited anyone over. Barely anyone knew where I lived, really. Most of my old friends had drifted away during the long, quiet years, and I hadn't made any effort to reach out. I preferred it that way. Peace had become my most precious possession. But I knew that knock. I felt it in my bones. I opened the door to find Jessa standing there, and Monica standing behind her, arms crossed, eyes already tight with judgment. Jessa looked smaller somehow, in her oversized hoodie and mismatched sneakers, her hair thrown up carelessly. She looked tired. Not just physically, but in the way people look when the reality they built starts cracking under its own weight. Hi, Jessa said, trying for lightness but failing. She glanced behind me, like she expected to see the version of me she remembered, the always available, wallet open, problem-solving presence. But I didn't invite them in. I just stood there, the screen door between us like a line I had no intention of crossing again. "We've been trying to reach you," Monica said sharply. "You're not answering our calls." "I know," I said, calm, unshaken. She shifted her stance, like she expected more. An apology maybe, a crack in my armor. But I had nothing left to offer her. Not even guilt. Jessa stepped forward. "Can we talk?" I didn't move. "Say what you need to say." There was a long silence then. Jessa looked to her mother, who gave a small, annoyed sigh, then took over like she always had. "We're in a bind. Her financial aid didn't come through like we hoped, and I cut her off. And now you need me." She blinked, caught. "You've always helped before. You're the one who set the expectation." "No," I said, my voice firmer now. "I set the standard. There's a difference." Jessa spoke again, quieter this time. "I didn't mean to hurt you. At graduation, I mean. I wasn't trying to erase you." I studied her face. She looked sincere. But sincerity isn't the same as understanding. "You introduced me as your mom's ex, Jessa. That wasn't a slip. That was a choice." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know it would matter so much." "That's the point," I said. "It didn't matter to you." And that told me everything. Behind her, Monica rolled her eyes. "David, you're making this about your ego." "No." I snapped, eyes locking on hers, finally letting the steel show in my spine. "You made it about my utility. You both did. And when that utility ran out, so did your regard." They stood there, momentarily speechless. I could see it. How unfamiliar this version of me was to them. Not angry, not vindictive. Just done. "I was never part of your future plans," I said. "Just the fallback. The backup. The thanks for being around, I guess. But that's not enough anymore. That's not family." Jess's eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, I felt it. The old instinct to reach out, to comfort, to make it okay. But I didn't move. Because this was a moment she needed to feel, really feel. I had protected her from consequences her whole life. It hadn't done her any favors. "I'll get by," she said finally, voice cracking. "I always do." "I know you will," I replied. "You're smart, capable. But learning how to value the people who show up for you. That's part of growing up, too." Monica started to speak, but I didn't let her. "I'm not your villain," I said. "I'm just not your crutch anymore." And then I closed the door. Not slammed. Just a firm, final push. The sound of a boundary being drawn in wood and metal. I leaned against it for a moment after they were gone, letting the silence wash back over me. It didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. For once, I had chosen my own peace over someone else's chaos. And it felt right. That evening, I cooked a small meal for myself, turned on an old jazz record, and read for hours. No interruptions. No requests. Just me, in a space that didn't ask me to be anything I wasn't. They'd figure it out. They had to. Because the man they had once depended on had finally stopped showing up to be dismissed. And I had finally learned that walking away wasn't quitting. It was surviving. It's strange, the way silence becomes a kind of music when you stop being afraid of it. In the beginning, I kept expecting the quiet to turn on me, like some lurking predator waiting to pounce once the adrenaline wore off. I thought I'd break down. I thought I'd crumble without the rituals I used to cling to. Checking in on Monica's moods, waiting for Jessa to come home, solving problems before anyone else even knew they existed. But none of that happened. There was no dramatic collapse. Instead, there was just stillness. And slowly, a new kind of life took root in it. I learned how to be alone again, not as a punishment, but as a reclamation. I woke up early not because someone needed breakfast or a ride, but because I liked watching the light creep over the window panes. I sat with my coffee in silence, reading books I had abandoned years ago. I took long walks without a destination. I talked to strangers in the grocery store line. I started going to the community center on Sundays, not for worship, but just to be around people without having to carry any of them. My therapist called it rebuilding identity, but to me, it just felt like coming home to myself. Monica tried once more to reach out, weeks after the doorstep visit. She emailed a long, carefully curated message. Said she'd been thinking a lot. Said she realized we both made mistakes. that she hoped we could be civil for Jess's sake. There was no apology, just an invitation to resume a dynamic where I funded the framework of a family that never truly welcomed me. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some doors stay closed for a reason. Jessa messaged me on my birthday. A single line, "Happy birthday. I hope you're doing okay." It was the first time I'd heard from her without an ask attached. I stared at the message for a long time. I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to ask how she was doing, but I didn't. I'd spent enough of my life chasing crumbs. I wasn't angry. I just knew better now. Boundaries, I'd learned, aren't walls, they're doors you close with love. And sometimes, with sorrow. The money stayed where it was, in her name, untouched. It would help her if she needed it, but I didn't use it to buy back a role that had already been stripped from me. I hoped one day she'd understand that love, real love, doesn't always look like a safety net. Sometimes, it looks like letting someone face their own fall so they can learn how to land. I thought often about the man I used to be. The man who stayed quiet, who smiled through dismissal, who kept paying, fixing, showing up in the hopes that one day someone would say, "You mattered." I mourned him, not because he was weak, but because he never knew he could stop begging for worth. And in his place now stood someone different. Someone who didn't need applause to feel proud, who didn't need a title to feel like a father, who finally understood that love without dignity is not love, it's servitude. And I had done enough of that for one lifetime. I still think about Jessa. I always will. She was, and in some ways still is, my daughter. Nothing can erase the years I spent raising her, the stories we shared, the sound of her laughter echoing through the house I built. I loved her with everything I had. But sometimes love isn't enough to keep you in someone's life. Sometimes, love means stepping back and letting them become who they need to become, even if that version doesn't include you. One night, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of red wine, the city humming in the background. I watched the lights flicker in the apartment across from mine, little windows into other people's lives. I thought about how long it took me to learn what I now know, that being seen isn't a gift you earn from others. It's something you give yourself. By walking away when you're no longer valued. By closing the door without slamming it. By choosing peace, even when it breaks your heart. In the end, I didn't disappear. I just stopped performing. And in the quiet that followed, I found something I never thought I'd have again. Myself. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, whether it reminded you of something personal or simply moved you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotionally grounded family dramas told from the heart, where every chapter explores the hard truths behind silence, sacrifice, and self-worth. See you soon in the next one.